Hello, this is Dr. James Taylor, and I am running for State Superintendent of Public Instruction for the great state of Oklahoma. And I would sure love to have your vote this June 16th. Please look at that and go to my website at taylor4ok.org, taylor4ok.org. I'm going to give you a quick commercial here, and here's the first commercial. I have a couple of things that I want to emphasize. One is it's called a pebble in your shoe. You know, when you get a pebble in your shoe, if you ignore it, it's going to be irritating. So you got to have to deal with it. What this does is it traces the history of the black voters. Blacks used to vote 100% Republican and until we were betrayed by the Republican Party, and so they switched off and started voting Democrat. It wasn't a huge number at first, but then it became one. The good news is, as when Donald Trump became president, he has actually started bringing back some of the blacks back into the fold. So that's something that's available for me. Here's another thing. It's called critical race theory versus the Bible. I was speaking on critical race theory before we passed House Bill 1775. And what critical race theory is basically white people apologizing for being white. I mean, that was the dumbest thing I'd ever seen in my life. So what they were actually saying, they didn't say this out loud, but they were saying, God, you blew it, and so I have to apologize for your mistakes. Listen, the God that I serve, he makes no mistakes. And so what had happened was when we passed House Bill 1775, there were a group of parents and teachers and administrators that sued our state. When that happened, I got a phone call from the AG's office saying, hey, we hear that you are the tip of the spear on critical race theory. I said, I don't know about all that, but I do speak on it. And they said, hey, we've been sued and we'd like to use your materials in our lawsuit to help us defend ourselves. And I said, awesome. So they got all of my materials, got the original sources. And so they were actually using my materials in order to win their case. And so I have already had impact upon our school on a statewide basis. What you need to know about me is this: I am a lifelong Republican. I am a fiscally responsible, constitutional conservative, black Republican. I say it that way for two reasons. One, I've also challenged Tom Cole when I ran for office in District 4. And when I was running, I was asked the question, JT, do you have the ability to stand alone or even stand against your own party? And I would say, I'm a black, constitutionally conservative, fiscally responsible black Republican. What do you think? You know, because there's not a whole lot of us that are out there. The second reason why I say lifelong Republican is this. We have a lot of, in our state, it wasn't always like this, but in our state, unless you have an R by your name, you're not going to be elected to statewide office. And so we have people that put R's by their name just so they can be elected because they're not going to be elected with a D by their name. And so I say lifelong because I've never been a Democrat, never entertained the idea of being a Democrat. There are two candidates in this race, one who ran as a Democrat for this position twice and lost, and then switched parties as a Republican and ran against Walters last time and lost again. There's another one who claims that they're a lifelong Republican, and they were in this, they had someone come and talk to them and say, put your name on the ballot as a Democrat, then you can win as a Democrat. Well, they switched parties from a Republican to the Democrat and they lost, and then they switched back to the Republicans and then they won in the current seat that they hold at this time. The reason why that's important is this. All of us remember Joy Hoffmeister. She was the superintendent of schools. Full disclosure, I voted for her twice. But what happened was, during her second administration, I said to my wife, who was a very godly woman, I said to her, honey, I don't think Joy is a Republican. I think she's a Democrat. My wife says, why do you say that? And I said, well, I can't pinpoint it, but there's something my spirit is telling me isn't right. And I responded that as I'm also a pastor. I'm bivocational. I teach high school in Little Lakes High School, and I'm also a pastor. And so I rely upon what the Lord tells me. And so, lo and behold, what happened? Halfway through her second term, Joy Hoffmeister switched parties and became a Democrat. The other thing I have up here is this. My book is called It's Biblical, Not Political. This deals with, I wrote this in 2015. I had no intentions of running for office. That wasn't even a thought in my mind. But in 2015, I wrote this, And I had to get a new publisher because they ended up being closed down by the state. And so I've been publishing this myself. Well, because I'm running for state superintendent, there's been a buzz for this book, and so I have a new publisher. When I was going through this, they asked me to reread it and check out things, but I wanted to say something that I put in here in the acknowledgement. This was in the acknowledgement in 2015, is what I said. And I say, quote, "I wish to acknowledge the members of Tate Publishing Company who encouraged me to continue to write this book after I became discouraged. I became discouraged at watching candidates say they are going to do one thing and then watch them do the opposite when they were voted into office." And that's something that has been going on and on and on and on. And I think at some point we've got to take the words of Einstein to heart, where he says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. When is it that we as Republicans are going to change the outcome by changing what we do? That's something that's got to be important. Well, in this book, it deals with all these issues, 17 issues. It deals with election, it deals with immigration, it deals with marriage, it deals with excessive debt, it deals with racism, it deals with the issue of socialism. A lot of people think God's a socialist. He is not. And it deals with education. The things that I say about education were the same things I was saying, because these are actually sermons that I actually preach from this pulpit. They are sermons that have been modified for this because it's the way I live. These are the things that are important to me. So that's important to understand. It is important for us to understand this. It is not the government's responsibility to educate our kids. It is not the state of Oklahoma's responsibility to educate our kids. It is not even the school district's responsibility to educate our kids. It's not even the church's responsibility to educate our kids. It is the parents' responsibility to educate our kids. That's what's really important. In fact, if you have a Judeo-Christian principle in your life, then you know that God holds the fathers responsible for what happens in their home. Excellent example of this is in the Garden of Eden. When you ask the question, who sinned first? Well, who sinned first was Eve. But the scripture says she ate and she gave, which means that Adam was standing right there watching his wife talk to some other dude about what's going on in his household, because that was going against what was taught to her in their household. So it is the parents' responsibility to determine if they're going to put their kids in private school, if they're going to put their kids in church school, if they're going to put their kids in public school, if they're going to homeschool, if they're going to put them in charter school. That is solely the parents' responsibility and not the school district's responsibility or the state of Oklahoma's responsibility to do that. I need to share something that my superintendent told me to share, because I've been in the classroom for 18 years teaching. And I've been in the pulpit since '77. So whether I'm teaching in the pulpit or whether I'm teaching in the classroom, teaching is teaching. It's the same thing. It's just a different message that you're trying to convey. And my superintendent, Dr. J. Thomas from Little Axe High School, he told me, his words were, you need to lean into this to tell everyone where you go this story. So I'm going to do that. One of the things that I do is I believe in parental empowerment, that the parents need to be very much involved with their students' education. And unfortunately, a lot of parents are not, and that's for lots of reasons, but they're not. So what I do is I engage the parent. The first week of school, the first day especially, is the most important day in education. And so what I do is I tell the kids on the first day, because you only have maybe 2-3 days at the most of that first week. And I make sure that everybody has an A on their paper, so I can do what I'm going to do. So I tell them, hey, guys, I'm going to call your parents this weekend. And their eyes get as big as sausage, just deer in the headlight. And I said, no, it's not that bad. This is good. This is a good thing. I'm going to call your parents and I'm going to brag on you. Now, they don't know what to do with that. But what I do is I call their parents and I say to them, I'm Dr. James Taylor. I currently have your child in early U.S. history or whatever the subject is. And they currently have an A in my class. And I anticipate that they're going to continue to do A work. Now, I've been doing this now. I've been in the classroom for 18 years. And one of the great tragedies that I have found is every single year, without fail, every single year I hear at least one parent say, you're the first teacher that's ever called and said something positive about my child. Now that should not be. I have sophomores. I'm going to explain that in a minute. I have sophomores. And so there should have been at least 9 other teachers that have said something positive about those children. Now, I always ask the question, we have, in 2024, the public opinion of education was at 41%. In 2025, that dropped down to 31%. Right now, there is an epidemic of parents pulling their kids out of public schools and putting them in one of the other alternatives. That's going on right now across our state. Well, what do you think would happen if we had 10% of the parents do what I do? I'm sorry, 10% of the teachers do what I do, contacting the parent in our state. That would have an impact. Now, if we can get 50%, you can't mandate this. You can only encourage them to do this, but because it's got to be something that comes from the heart. And so if we can get that to happen, that's going to change the perception of education. Now, my secretary at our school, she told me one day, she said, you know, Dr. Taylor, you have more parents showing up for parent-teacher conference than the other teachers. And again, why would that be? Because I am engaging the parent and going out and talking to the parents and getting the parents involved in the whole process of the education. And so I do that, and we'll continue to do that. One of the things that is important, the Governor Stitt just signed into law a new bill for education. No matter who is elected as a superintendent, they're going to look good because of what the legislatures have done with adding phonics back in. I don't know why they took it out, but they were adding phonics and other things, specialists, paid specialists to come in and help the kids to read. So that's all good. That's all the powerful things that they're doing. And so no matter who is elected, they're going to get a rise from that, just that alone, because phonics is a big deal. My daughter is in 2nd grade, and last summer she was reading at a 5th grade level because they teach phonics there, and she learns cursive as well. And so we have as a standard reading at grade level by 3rd grade. That's our statewide standard. I don't like that standard. I think we ought to be reading at grade level in 1st grade. Get it started early and test them earlier so that those kids don't fall through the cracks, so that we can have these kids to be able to know what's going on. So that's one of the things that no matter who's going to be elected, that's going to be a positive thing that we're going to be able to see. One of the things that I do is I purchase a Constitution and a Declaration of Independence, and that's our kids' textbook. I give that to them, and then I have reproductions of original documents in my classroom that I pass around to the students, that they can actually feel what it's like, look what the size of some of these things are, and that's what makes a difference. What that does is it helps with the kids understanding our heritage of our country, because they've just recently taken out history standards that are a little bit concerning to me. But if you look at how our foundation of our nation got started, it's amazing. When we were looking at the Declaration of Independence, most people don't know this. A lot of people, because of revisionist historians, tell us that our founding fathers were all racist and all of them owned slaves and wanted slavery to stay. And that's an absolute lie. When Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, I tell my students, take out your Declaration or take out your Constitution, turn to page 43, because that's the page it is, and they look at that and then they compare it to what Jefferson actually wrote, because there is a difference. There's 3 sections in there where Jefferson berates King George III for the issue of slavery and how horrible it is and how ungodly this behavior is. And we put this in there, but you had 2 states, South Carolina and Georgia, who said, if that's in the Declaration of Independence, which is our birth certificate, if that's in there, then we cannot be a part of this union. Well, at that time, South Carolina and Georgia had more blacks in it than they did whites. And we could not afford to have our southern flank unprotected so that the British could just march on in. And so our founding fathers, they took it out, Jefferson took it out, and they decided that they would deal with this in 20 years because they were going to get rid of slavery. And it would have probably happened except for one thing. A man by the name of Eli Whitney showed up. And Eli Whitney, went to a plantation in Georgia, and he saw what was going on, and he created the cotton gin. And that was a game revolutionary change. What the cotton gin was to that society is what this is to ours. It changed everything. We can't even think about, I do all my banking and driving and everything off of here. Well, the cotton gin was just like that in the South, and cotton became king. I oftentimes say that a case could be made that Eli Whitney was the cause of the Civil War because of the cotton gin that he created. Otherwise, it would not have gone. So the kids get to look at that and compare that. When we're looking at the Valley Forge, which was a horrible winter, instead of just talking about how horrible it was, the kids get to look at the letters from the people who were there and reading them, and from George Washington, and how they were saying it was God who sustained them. God is the one who provided for them in the midst of all those things. So our kids get that information that they're getting from that. When we talk about, John Adams says that our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is totally inadequate to govern otherwise. Well, when they said religion, they didn't mean religion like we do today. They meant Christianity. And so we can see that this is something that's going on in our society. The kids get to hear that. One of the things that I want to share with you is this. Two things I got to share before time's up. And that is this. I believe that what Ryan Walters was attempting to do in our state was on the right track. He was trying to protect our kids and keep them safe, and he was trying to do some things right. I believe that his problem was his methodology was flawed. Let me illustrate it with the Trump Bible. There was no reason to do the Trump Bible. Spend 9 months on the Trump Bible issue when the Gideons had offered to put the Bibles in for free, and across the street from our church is an elementary school that we would have gladly put Bibles in there for the people. So those type of things. So I think that what he was trying to do was on the right track, and I would consider doing that. The last thing I want to mention here is this. I also am one who believes in consolidation of our superintendents across our state. This is something that needs to take place, and I've been talking about it, but now we got something in place. And so I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time on this. It's not completed done. I got about 6 pages of it, but this shows how it is now, and the bureaucracy going to accountability. We want to make sure that we can change that. Here's what happens. You have it used to be like this. We had a county superintendent, and we've changed that. And what you get better accountability with a county superintendent. Let me illustrate it like this. If you have a teacher at a school that does some inappropriate things and is released, all they do is go to another county down the street and get hired, or go down to another school district or another city and they get hired there. This gives you an umbrella of accountability that's going to be greatly reduced from that. You have duplication of tasks. You have, instead of having one county has a curriculum committee, as opposed to having 28, 30 curriculum committees in our community, that you have all the stuff that they want, the pool, and then the individual school districts can pick what they want from that. This is not rocket science. This is stuff that we've done before, but I will tell you what's happening. When I talk about this, the people of the great state of Oklahoma, they love it. The ones who are opposed, most are the superintendents, because they're looking at it as though I am taking their jobs away or suggesting that. But it's really, you're still going to have some administration. There's title changes and things that are going to happen. But there's a lot more about that we can say. The last thing I want to share is this. I love teaching. One of the reasons why I got into this race late was because I would have to leave the classroom. And I wasn't about to leave the classroom. I just love it so much. And I will tell you this. If the Lord blesses me with this position, I made a commitment to teach. Not just go visit schools, but to teach at least once a month. I like to do it once a week, but to teach each time in a class to actually do that. And so I want to read to you what one of my students, I asked her permission. She said I could share this with you. And this is what she says about me. She's a senior. I've had her in my advocacy class, which is like a study hall class, from her freshman year to her senior year this year. She says this, I got this 2 weeks ago. You've been the best role model and teacher. I want you to know that you'll always be in my heart from how much you've impacted my life for the better. You're truly an amazing and the most inspirational person from this school. I pray you have an amazing summer and an amazing candidacy. Then she says love in her name, and then in parentheses she put your favorite. The reason why she put your favorite in parentheses is because my students actually in class, they argue about who my favorite is. They'll be saying, no, I'm his favorite. No, I'm his favorite. And I just smile because that's the way it ought to be in every classroom. Again, I'm Dr. James Taylor. I'm bivocational. I'm a pastor. I'm a teacher. I teach high school. I get all the sophomores. My schedule now has been changed to where I get all the sophomores. All sophomores take my class as it is right now. So Taylor for OK.org, Taylor for OK.org, number 4, and appreciate you going to I need your vote, and be in prayer that God will grant me his favor. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.